What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Okay, so if you're a little bit confused as to why I'm kicking off an atheist channel with a quote from the Bible, from Ecclesiastes, it's because we're here again, folks. It's quite a good quote, that. It's quite a good book, actually. We are here again with our rocks, atheists, and there's a certain amount of exasperation that we're still at this. I made a video 7 years ago on this, why rocks are not atheists, and then another video which showed the level of exasperation. Then 5 years ago, are rocks atheists, 150th anniversary edition. The title kind of says it all, really, doesn't it? But we're still there. We're still having this, what I think is a rather bizarre discussion, and I think it's bizarre because the argument that takes place is like, it's an argument that you could have, but it's not the main argument regarding the definition, which just seems to get ignored. Let me just set this up. So there's been a few people making videos on this, discussing it again. Aaron Ra responded to somebody who'd made a list of like top 10 ridiculous things people believe in nowadays, sort of thing, and one of them was that rocks are atheists, and he responded, well, rocks are atheists. So we're not moving on. There's nothing new under the sun, folks, so we're back here again. So I want to reiterate my position on this yet again, and that is, first off, that words are there to serve a purpose. And dictionaries don't tell us what words mean. Dictionaries describe the way that words are used, and that is effectively how we define words. Words are defined by their usage. And it's an interesting thing with regard to the word atheist, is that, let me quote you. I could give you a dozen dictionary definitions, but I'll quote from lexico.com, which is part now, it's like the free part of the umbrella of the Oxford Dictionaries, which of course produces the world famous Oxford English Dictionary, which extends to about the width of this room in its full edition. And this is how they define the term atheist: a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods. Now, what is interesting in that is that, let's not get into this business of whether it's a lack of belief or an active disbelief or whatever, is that there are two components to that definition. One of them is personhood, and one of them pertains to God belief. Okay, two components, and both those components need to be there, both personhood and a lack of belief or disbelief in God. Both of those need to be present, and yet these conversations seem to take place utterly just forgetting, as if part of that definition doesn't actually exist. It's as if, and I've given this example before, a non-Jew is a Gentile, right? But a rock isn't a Gentile, because a Gentile is a person who is not a Jew, right? It's the same thing here. You need to have both those components. On what grounds can anybody unilaterally declare, I'm going to have this discussion, I'm going to make my arguments, but I'm just going to ignore half of the definition? There are no grounds for you to do that. And if you're going to do that, why ignore that half of the definition? Why not ignore the other half of the definition about belief in God? Why not say, well, an atheist is a person, right? Doesn't matter about, I'm just going to ignore that other half of the definition. You would never do that, would you? Because, well, it's just ridiculous. What people end up doing with regard to this is effectively discussing the word atheist and what it means, but actually what they talk about is the word atheism. Right. And the word atheist is not anything that fulfills the requirements of atheism. It is a person who fills the requirements of atheism. So if you miss out the atheist, the personhood component, then of course you can derive these ridiculous conclusions like rocks are atheists, because you've just removed one of the two key foundational requirements of the definition of the word atheist. And bear in mind, what dictionaries do, like I say, they don't decide by fiat and just mandate to us what words mean. They reflect usage. So why would this usage evolve? Well, that's because words need to be useful to us. They need to have utility. And so the ways in which we frame them, the ways in which we use them, reflect the ways that give us the most utility. And in this respect, there is absolutely no utility whatsoever in defining atheist in a term that does not include personhood. Imagine this, for example. One thing that you will note if you follow this channel, and I suggest you do, it's a wonderful channel and you get to look at me, is that I look at survey data about levels of religiosity and God belief in the UK, across the rest of Europe, and more recently over the last couple of years in the United States as well. So one of the things that is interesting is to know how many atheists there are in the UK and how many atheists there are in the UK versus 100 years back. Now, see how the data is confounded there if we start to include rocks in our definition of atheist. It's very, very difficult to work it out. The UK is built, of course, once you go down through the crust, you get into the mantle. What is there there? Is there this kind of highly viscous liquid atheist that perfuses underneath the bedrock of the United Kingdom? Does that class as one atheist? Does a rock have to be a certain size? Is a grain of sand an atheist? What about a seam of sandstone? Ladies and gentlemen, is a seam of sandstone a single atheist, or do we classify each grain of sand as an individual atheist? If I give you the simple statement, which I'm sure that you could pass because you're not stupid, right, that the number of atheists in the UK has increased over the last century, you would not regard that as me detailing for you a geological fact that effectively there has been more coastal erosion within the United Kingdom and therefore the number of individual rocks in the United Kingdom has increased. You would understand that I'm not including rocks because rocks are not included in the definition of atheist. Personhood is the criteria where we are dealing with atheists. An atheist is a person who disbelieves or lacks a belief in God. It is not a rock. It is not a rock because we do not ascribe personhood to rocks. Now, there are conversations that we can have. We can discuss atheism and what we mean by atheism, and in that context, we can ignore the issue of personhood. But when we talk about atheist, we cannot. What is interesting, maybe a conversation we will have in the future, when definitions can change to take account of new situations, words can be used in new ways. Maybe we will develop artificial intelligences that are sufficiently developed on a level of our own or above, whereupon the understanding, that the idea of being an atheist could apply to those as well. And then we'll have to decide, well, where do we stand on this? Right? Are we ascribing to those artificial general intelligences personhood or not? And if we decide, no, personhood is a thing that's specific to human beings, and we wouldn't ascribe it to something of equal or greater intelligence, the ability to pass the ideas about God and to have an understanding of what that could mean, what a deity could be, right? We may not choose to apply the word personhood to it, but we may still choose to apply the word atheist. And in those circumstances, our definitions will start to evolve, I am sure, to take account of these things, which at present do not exist. Ergo, they do not feature into our definition. But I'm quite certain, right, I would happily stake my house on this, that in 20 years' time or 50 years' time, we will not be using the word atheist to refer to rocks. There is no context in which that is useful. Ergo, there is no context in which we will do it. Ergo, dictionaries will not reflect it. And it is not reasonable to describe that as the definition. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'd ask you to look out for two things. The first is my next video on this subject, which will probably take place in about another 5 years when this crops up again. And the second thing, of all the videos that I've ever made, the video that I'm perhaps most proud of was a video that I made 10 years ago now called I Know You Haven't Got Soul, where I outlined all the arguments that I could come up with as to why we do not have an immaterial, immortal soul that survives our death. It's a foundational question for religion, that, because most of the tenets of Christianity, at least, just dissolve if you do not have a component that can survive your death. So it's an important question for that aspect alone. And at the time that I made that video, I'd never seen another video that did the same thing that my video had done, that outlined those arguments. In fact, some of the arguments that I made in that video then, I hadn't seen before, and I still haven't seen since. But it's an old video. It has some quite twee graphics, but I like those graphics. But the sound is atrocious. The sound was poor at the time. I want to remake that. Keep some of the old graphics, change a couple of the bits within it, basically keep the same structure and most of the same graphics, but redo the audio and republish that. So that's going to be my plan for later on in this month. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.